Welcome back to another round Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe with a friend, a relative, an associate, an enemy, a colleague, anyone in between. It's appreciated. Now, with that being said, I'm only doing the main events today. There are some pretty good fights on, all of the undercards, but with that being said, my time's limited and I really want to sort of just get into those fights, the fights that I guess everyone's turning up to see, and yeah, basically keeping it moving. So I'm not gonna speak about any of the undercard fights, not even which ones to look out for, not on this particular occasion. But with that being said, let's get into the picks, and I'm gonna start with Lawal versus Isaac Chamberlain. Now, this fight was bumped up to main event after Joshua Buatsi versus Dan Aziz got postponed, with Dan Aziz suffering a back injury. Again, haven't been able to speak to Dan recently, but hope he's doing good, hope he's recovering. I need to call him when I've done this. So, how do I see the fight going? Well, first things first, looking at them both on the scales earlier on today, they both looked in very good shape. Neither person looked like they super struggled to make the weight. No one looked drained or gaunt or anything like that. They looked fully sort of malleable, hydrated to a certain extent. So in my opinion, they will both be going into the ring fully hydrated and probably in the best possible shape that they can be, outside of any injuries we don't know about. So ultimately, how does this fight play out? Well, of the two, Isaac Chamberlain is the boxer. His footwork is some of the best at the domestic scene in the cruiserweight division, probably even up to European. He's very good at punching off of his jab. And what I mean by that is putting his jab out into the atmosphere and basically putting a combination shot behind it, whether that be the straight right, maybe that sort of the right hook. He's also very good at punching off of or jabbing off of movement as well. So he can kind of jab on the front foot and the back foot, even though he does usually sacrifice going for the jab in terms of staying safe. So sometimes when he's moving back, he'll tuck himself up to make sure that any impact that's coming from his opponent, he can sort of take another fine ride. He's got a pretty good chin. He's been down, he's hit the canvas a couple of times in his career, but he's got heart. He's never been stopped, and ultimately, if we go back to the Crispin and Smith fight, look, he suffered a broken orbital socket in that fight and still fought all the way through to the end. So we know he's got grit and determination as well. On the other hand, you've got Lawal, who's a bit more of a crude opponent than Isaac Chamberlain. His footwork and his, his boxing brain and IQ isn't of the same level, but what he has is the freakish power. He seems to be able to generate power from sometimes almost nowhere. He could be, almost Deontay Wilder-esque. You could say he's losing rounds, maybe being outboxed, and then just from nowhere a shot comes that just changes the course of the fight. Now, that's not necessarily to say that it's a straight knockout, but as we saw in previous fights, you would have had like a shot that's come out of somewhere and all of a sudden that one shot has broken someone's jaw, stopping them from being able to continue. He does have the get out of jail card, as a lot of people would call it, but he isn't a person that seems like he can stick to a game plan for the long haul, and I feel like he's a type that can get riled up and wound up if you maybe make things a little bit either dirty, or you get him into a point where you don't allow him the success that he wants. He seems like the type of person whereby maybe he can lose his head a bit, lose his shape, and possibly start to unravel, especially if there's pressure getting to him as well. So with all of that being said, the benefit he has is he's undefeated. He doesn't know what it's like to lose. He's had to sort of come up the ranks the same way as maybe Isaac Chamberlain, but Isaac has been a comfortable second in his two biggest fights at this point. The Crispin and Smith fight was his for the taking, but he started way too slow and allowed damage to accumulate too early, so ultimately kind of went into survival mode. You know, he gave it his all sort of towards the end of the fight, but he didn't do enough on the first half. It's like he had this happy to be here sort of atmosphere and aura about him. In the Lawrence Okoli fight, I think he let the pressure of the situation kind of get to him, and I don't think, obviously it wasn't the greatest of fights anyway, but I don't think he did enough to try and cause any type of separation between him and Okoli. So is that a character flaw, or was that just an unfortunate circumstance on both times? This, I think, is where we find out. If he comes in looking a bit lackadaisical and a bit relaxed and almost like just waiting for things to happen as opposed to trying to make certain things happen, then you could definitely say he's probably in sparring partner mode, and that's just naturally what he's going to be moving forward. And in which case he will probably, you know, take something flush that's going to hurt him, maybe not stop him, but it's going to hurt him, going to put him in his shell and make him just be happy to see the final bell. Now, this is all a mentality thing, so ultimately I have to go with the boxing ability, like who has the more experience, who has the better fundamentals. All of that stuff to me screams Isaac Chamberlain. He's also got power, and I've never really seen Lawal respond positively to, you know, sort of sustain pressure. He's always been able to kind of get himself out of jail just before that pressure sort of comes on top. But the last fight I saw him at live was at Ali Pali last year, and he wasn't doing very well in that fight at all. He was pretty much losing almost every round until he managed to find that one big shot. So in this fight, I think that's his saving grace, is that one big shot. However, I do think Isaac is defensively responsible enough not to allow that shot to happen, and with that being said, I think he starts fairly early and he does start to wear and grind Mikael Lawal down and probably start to break his resistance and break his resolve as the rounds go on. And I can see a Isaac Chamberlain stoppage around about the 9th or the 10th round, when Mikael Lawal maybe starts to get a bit tired, starts to get a bit jaded. So that is a prediction. I am going for late rounds stoppage, rounds 9 to 10. Could be later than that, could even be a UD decision, but I do see Isaac Chamberlain winning. Anything other than that, and again, he's basically just you know, a very high level sparring partner at this point. Moving over to Jack Catterall versus Jorge Linares. Now this one, there's a lot less for me to really delve into. Look, Jorge Linares, 3 division, 3-weight, 3-time world champ. He was one of the sort of model professionals about sort of 7-8 years ago, 9 years ago. He's had a lot of good quality fights, good quality spars. He is he's pretty much a legend of the sport at this point, but he's on the back 9 of his career. And the only metric I really need is the one time he's gone up to 140 properly and fought a 140 pounder. He was knocked out within 1 round. Luckily for him, Jack Catterall doesn't hit hard enough to make that necessarily the case, but I do think that Jack Catterall, just being such a naturally bigger, stronger and more sort of technically proficient opponent, he's here to make a statement. He wants to obviously do better than what Devin Haney did, because obviously Haney is now sort of at 140, so that's a good measuring stick. Also, it would, you know, he might be looking to possibly do better than Vasily Lomachenko did with Linares as well. So yeah, I don't really want to go into any huge breakdown on this one, not really necessary. I always said that I didn't think this fight was appropriate for Jack Catterall if he's supposed to be at world level, taking on a 135 pounder who's coming off of 3 defeats, 2 of which were via knockout, I believe. Yeah, it's to me it's a Jack Catterall win, and I'm seeing a victory within 8 rounds. Maybe it shouldn't be as long as 8, but I do think that Linares will be competitive in those first 2 to 3 rounds, use his speed advantage and the fact that he does crack hard. Probably for Catterall to have to wear him out a little bit, tire him, and sort of just pick him apart a little bit, bust him up, and then eventually get that stoppage in those later rounds. But I do expect it to be a fairly enjoyable fight, at least for sort of the first 4 to 5. Last but not least, there is Alexis Rocha versus Santillan, who is, what is he, 31-0, I think, with 16 KOs. I think it's something like that. I could be wrong in the KO percentage, but Alexis Rocha, I think, is 23-1 with, I think it's 15 KOs, and the only loss he had was to Rashidi Ellis. Now, neither person has necessarily had the greatest of opposition thus far, and you could say, well, the last time Alexis Rocha stepped up, he got beat, depending on how much of a step up you consider Rashidi Ellis. But that being said, they've both been on a steady trajectory in this one. Obviously, you've got Santillan, who's undefeated, I think, in 31 bouts, so he doesn't know defeat. But you go through his record, there's not a huge amount there either for you to necessarily look at and try and work out and disseminate. So overall, I think this is another portion of the building block for Alexis Rocha at the 147 division. All those belts are going to start fragmenting soon. This is a play, I believe, just to kind of keep him at those higher rankings so that he can fight for one of those belts as soon as they do become vacant from Terence Crawford. I'm not expecting this fight to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. Do know Santillan is quite, he's sort of quite capable, fairly good footwork and a pretty decent engine. And from what I can remember of some of his fights, he does sort of throw a lot of shots, so he's not an inactive fighter in the ring. He's very much he's definitely a combination puncher, someone that likes to sort of get on top of his opponent and sort of work and sort of wear them down in that sense, and use his work rate to basically win the rounds and ultimately win the decision. Rocha, I think, has the necessary skill to nullify him in terms of that extra work rate and aggression, and I do think Rocha is going to aim to probably keep this one a bit more mid to long range as opposed to on the inside, as he has been in a few other fights, especially considering that he's not the he's not the most strongest of punchers. So being on the inside and just shipping unnecessary punishment just doesn't really seem like the logical choice. But with this one, I do expect Alexis Rocha to come away with the decision here. I think it will be a unanimous decision. Likely we're looking at 8 rounds to 4 type fight, maybe 9 rounds to 3. And yeah, pretty much that's as far as I'm going to sort of take that one. It's not the greatest of weekends, but there is, like I said, there's enough stuff on each of the undercards. If you do want to watch some decent work, I'm sure you will have enough there to kind of keep you satisfied, at least for a short period of time. So I'm going to leave it there. Like and subscribe. We will be back for the weekend wrap. Maybe I might be able to squeeze in an episode over the weekend, depends on what really sort of takes my fancy. But with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Very quick one in that respect, and the Spaces Picks locked.